Law of Protection Part 1, Number 1596, April 13, 2026. Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, Category Stroke, Cardiovascular Disease, CKD, Dementia, Cancer. Preface. I woke up early this morning at 5:31 a.m. Suddenly, a name appeared clearly in my mind, Law of Protection. I immediately thought about Isaac Newton's law of motion. Newton's work provided a simple mathematical structure explaining how interacting forces influence physical behavior. That structure has guided engineering and physics for nearly 400 years. Then I asked myself, why not apply a similarly simple and clear name for this biomedical application? Of course, human physiology does not literally follow Newtonian mechanics. In my personal opinion, biomedicine is more complex, nonlinear, and adaptive. However, the underlying concept of interacting variables influencing system behavior can still provide useful inspiration. Based on this thinking, I propose the law of protection, with a clearly defined application scope limited to biomedicine, specifically as an early warning risk indicator for chronic diseases driven by metabolic disorders. Introduction. The objective of this work is not to claim the human physiology literally follows Newtonian mechanics. Rather, Newton's second law of motion, discovered nearly 400 years ago, serves as conceptual inspiration for understanding how multiple interacting variables jointly influence behavior within a complex biomedical system. Newton's framework emphasizes the amplification effect created through the arithmetic operation of multiplication during the past 45 days. I have been studying the stroke risk triggering sensitivity index (TSI) proxy and validating its applicability across several situations. Let me first present the TSI formula. TSI equals SBP/dBP 45 * SBP 120 * glucose 120 * amplifier, where glucose equals 120 until measured glucose data becomes available. In other words, 120 mg DL is used as the default value for the glucose variable. Furthermore, amplifier equals 120 for T to D history greater than 20 years. Amplifier equals 110 for T to D history greater than 10 years but 20 years. Amplifier equals 100 for T to D history 10 years. These amplifier values are dimensionless coefficients, not clinical units. They are unit-free scaling factors used only to represent relative influence within the mathematical model. Scope of the law of protection. The law of protection applies primarily to chronic diseases strongly associated with long-term metabolic imbalance and vascular damage. These conditions include stroke, cardiovascular disease, heart attack, coronary artery disease, chronic kidney disease, CKD, vascular dementia, certain cancers related to metabolic disorders. These diseases usually develop slowly over many years. The underlying damage process often involves long-term interactions among glucose exposure, blood pressure loading, disturbed lipid conditions, vascular stiffness, inflammation, and structural fatigue of biological tissues. Because these conditions evolve gradually, early warning becomes extremely important. Core concept of law of protection. The law of protection is implemented through the risk warning tool. The triggering sensitivity index (TSIC) is not intended to describe the full complexity of physiology. Instead, it provides a simple structured indicator reflecting how multiple stress factors interact multiplicatively within a biomedical system. Rather than treating each risk factor independently, TSI combines them into a single interaction expression. TSI equation C equals SBP/dBP 45 * SBP 120 * glucose 120 * amplifier. Amplifier equals 120 for T to D history greater than 20 years. Amplifier equals 110 for T to D history greater than 10 years but 20 years. Amplifier equals 100 for T to D history 10 years. Where SBP equals systolic blood pressure, AB equals diastolic blood pressure. SBP/dBP represents pulse pressure, reflecting vascular stiffness. Glucose represents metabolic condition. When measured glucose is not available, a default value of 120 mg DL is used. The amplifier reflects long-term accumulate metabolic exposure. These amplification values represent cumulative structural damage that may develop over time due to prolonged metabolic imbalance. The variance of the amplifier depends on the patient's vascular damage condition, which is primarily associated with long-term diabetes. Longer disease duration generally corresponds to increased vascular stiffness, reduced elasticity, and higher susceptibility to sudden stress events. Interpretation of the law of protection. The law of protection is based on a simple idea: when multiple stress factors act together, Their combined effect is often greater than the simple sum of their individual effects, as represented by the arithmetic operations of multiplication versus addition. Blood pressure alone does not fully describe vascular risk. Glucose alone does not fully describe metabolic damage. However, when mechanical stress and metabolic condition interact over time, they may gradually weaken biological structure. This interaction can increase vulnerability to sudden events such as stroke or heart attack. Practical meaning: the law of protection provides a simple early warning structure. TSI does not diagnose disease. TSI does not replace medical evaluation by physicians based on their accumulated knowledge and experience of healthcare, but TSI can indeed improve patients' self-awareness regarding personal risk. Instead, TSI functions as a daily monitoring signal reflecting whether the biomedical system is moving toward a safer zone or toward a higher risk zone. Because the equation structure is simple, it can be calculated easily and tracked over time. Trend and trajectory are often more informative than a single isolated measurement, such as quarterly lab-tested data. My personal monitoring example supporting the validity of law of protection: this morning, I measured my glucose immediately after waking up. This measurement filled the data gap between midnight and early morning, about 6 to 8 hours. I found that my average pre-breakfast glucose is approximately 94 mg VL, slightly below 100 mg VL, which is within a healthy range. It is neither too low nor too high, indicating neither hyperglycemia nor hypoglycemia. I also measured my blood pressure 4 times, to measurements on the upper arms left and right, and to measurements on the wrists left and right. All readings fell within a healthy range, with a 10% of variance range. The SPP values were relatively low between 102 mmHg and 112 mmHg, below 120 mmHg, but not excessively low, indicating a stable condition. I attached the daily data graphics of both glucose and blood pressure at the end of the paper, showing data directly entered into my iPhone-based personal medical AI system, Chronic. These graphics demonstrate how I monitor my own health conditions using my customized computer software program supported by AI capability. I have been developing this system for over the past 20 years. It has enabled me to collect more than 4 million data points related to detailed lifestyle behaviors, 10 categories, and primary biomarkers over the past 17 years. I also draw the 90-day moving average curves for both TSI2 and TSI3b. TSI2 is calculated without glucose input and is primarily applicable to cardiovascular disease risk evaluation in patients without diabetes. TSI3b includes glucose from CGM dataset and is more applicable for stroke risk evaluation. The difference between TSI3 and TSI3b lies in the glucose data source. TSI3 uses finger-piercing glucose measurements collected 4 times per day, while TSI3b uses CGM Libra sensor data collected 96 times per day. Therefore, strong big data support and factual evidence exist behind these curves. The curves begin on July 1, 2025, the day after I was discharged from Stanford Hospital following my stroke on June 21, 2025. The data extends from July 1, 2025 to April 13, 2026, approximately 286 days of continuous monitoring. This represents a relatively long observation period. Earlier in the recovery period, my TSI values approached or slightly exceeded 111, representing a higher risk level right after a stroke. Over 9.4 months, both TSI2 and TSI3b gradually decreased. Recently, over approximately the past 2 months, these 2 TSI curves have converged closely, stabilizing around the mid-90 range. This convergence indicates that the influence of glucose, whether included or excluded, has become smaller. In other words, both vascular mechanical stress from blood pressure and metabolic conditions from glucose are now relatively stable. The lowest observed values approached approximately 89 during 9 to 1025 to 10 to 1025, indicating movement into the safer zone. The overall pattern clearly shows that my biomedical condition has stabilized. Therefore, the probability of experiencing another stroke or heart attack is now very low, or at least significantly lower than before. This result provides strong reassurance. After the 2nd of August 2025, I have used this TSI monitoring tool approximately 20 times per day, especially when measuring blood pressure. Each time I enter blood pressure data, I immediately verify the updated TSI value. Glucose data must still be manually transferred from the Libra CGM reading into my medical AI software on iPhone. I intentionally choose manual input rather than full automation. Manual interaction reinforces memory and strengthens pattern recognition ability during the data entry process. My mind actively processes observations and interpretations. This continuous interaction strengthens understanding and helps imprint patterns into the brain. This relates to neuroscience mechanisms of learning and memory reinforcement. I have used this method continuously for more than 17 years, and it has proven very effective. This is one reason I understand my biomedical condition extremely well, often more thoroughly than physicians who see only periodic snapshots of health data. Through continuous observation, data entry, and pattern recognition, I gain deeper understanding of the dynamic behavior of my biomedical system. This is part 1.